Welcome back, guys, to the long-awaited follow-up on the road to $8 XRP, and today's video is actually episode 2. If you caught the first video in this series, you'll see that XRP price was currently sitting around $2.20 back on the 8th of July, and since then we've actually set new all-time highs for XRP and the highest ever weekly close here on the XRP price chart. Now, since setting that new all-time high, we have seen XRP actually pull back. And in today's video, we're going to discuss how all of this has played out in the last 3 to 4 weeks since the first video, and how we believe things are going to continue to play out for XRP and eventually give us those price targets that we're looking for. So, a lot to cover in today's video, guys. Let's jump into it. Now, for those who were fortunate enough to actually been here and caught the video when we discussed scaling into our XRP trade, and how in that video back here on the 8th of July, we actually touched on how XRP was likely to break out from these ranges, as we believed XRP was at the final stages of an accumulation structure. And now since then, we've seen price explode and now get to this new area where it's currently stalled out at. And this ugly scribble that we have here on the right is currently what I'm seeing here for XRP. So we'll jump into the lower time frames and discuss short-term technical analysis and how I think price could play out over the next days and weeks. Now, the reasoning for today's video is I do believe we are coming to the end of another accumulation range for XRP. And what you'll see on the top here is XRP's price today on the 15-minute time frame. And down here on the bottom side, we actually have XRP's price back from the end of that accumulation range in May and June and leading into July when we actually made our last video. And the reasoning for today's follow-up video is I do believe that XRP is yet again at the end of another accumulation range, and that we've seen a lot of similar structures actually pointing to XRP potentially breaking out from these levels and starting to go on and set new highs and continue its bull run. And if you've caught previous videos, you'll know that I believe that we are roughly in a stage like this for XRP, and so far on the move up, what we have seen is essentially things play out the way they did back in November, and that we are likely in a structural area like this for XRP now. And what I'm looking for is for this bull run to continue. And that right now I believe we are still only in early stages of this run. And I'm going to show you guys some examples here and help paint the picture better on where I see things for XRP at the moment. Now, in the last video, which was the road to a $500,000 XRP trade, we touched on the fact that we were most likely in a zone like this, actually just completing the ABC correction. And for those who haven't watched that video, this is where we referenced from Litecoin here on the 12-hour time frame back in 2017 during its mid-cycle correction. And so far what we've seen is actually XRP play out exactly like Litecoin did back in 2017, where it broke from this range, back tested it in this moment here, shot and set new all-time highs, just like we've seen on XRP right now, rejected, found support in this region around the 786 but above the 702, and then back in 2017 Litecoin actually bounced from these regions and then went on to continue its bull run and finished a full extension of this range, even poking a little bit higher. And if we have a look at XRP on a higher time frame here, you can see that I believe we have finished the mid-cycle correction for XRP similar to the way we did on Litecoin. We've actually broken to the upside, and now similar to the way Litecoin did right in these levels down here, I do think we will see something play out similar on XRP. As you can see, we have had that initial sell-off and back test right back into our 786 level as seen here on the left, finding support here the same way Litecoin did right at this same region. And then what I think comes next for XRP, price to actually shoot up back to those highs, reject again, flag out, and then break to the upside. And I think that if things were to play out like that on XRP on lower time frames, what we should start to see is a similar structure and similar accumulation range like we've seen back in June and July when we made that last video only just a few weeks ago. And right now I do think we are starting to see that, and that on lower time frames, if we do continue to see XRP actually grind to the upside and form a bit of a bullish channel here before then breaking out, I do believe that once it does break out, it will break out just like it did in early July, and that we should see XRP's price actually push and set new all-time highs here before then rejecting, flagging out, and then breaking up again, the same way Litecoin actually did on a higher time frame here in this moment. So the timing for today's video, similar to the first video in this series on the road to $8 XRP, is the fact that I do believe we are at the end of a very similar accumulation structure, and that if we do start to see these same patterns play out here on XRP like they did when we made that last video, which for those who weren't around was right here on the 8th of July, and if this continues to play out like it did back in July, then I do think XRP will perform the exact same way. Now, as far as things go for the wider market here, we have seen the Bitcoin dominance break down over a course of 24 days. And I do believe that was the first phase of alt season. And that during this period is actually when we've seen XRP's price shoot up and set new all-time highs. And now what I am expecting is the Bitcoin dominance here to stall out for a while. I don't think it's going to stall out for 40 days like it did back in 2021. I do think it will be a little bit shorter. However, what we will be paying attention to here on the channel is for this to form bearish structures and look like it wants to break to the downside. And I think once the Bitcoin dominance starts to break back below this 60.45% level, starts to close candles down below this level and continue to break down, that will be phase 2 of alt season and the final phase, which for those who are new here, this was how things played out in 2021. However, right now we're seeing things play out a little bit faster. The breakdown phase was shorter, and I do believe that this corrective phase will also be shorter, but then eventually what comes next is the second phase, the most exciting phase and the most explosive phase of the alt season. And just to put this in perspective for you guys, once we did see Bitcoin dominance actually break down from these ranges, this alt season lasted a total of 48 days. And I do believe that this one is actually going to be faster and wrap up quicker than 48 days like it did back in 2021 here. So I don't want to jump the gun and put in my little theory that I have here too soon. But one thing to note, if you caught the stock market and how the interest rates affect the price of everything and usually lead to recessions when we cut, what you'll notice is that we have a rate cut coming up in the next 24 hours, and that the next rate cut after that is actually on September 17th, which if we're to have a look at the way things are playing out right now, let's say we stall out here a little bit longer for the Bitcoin dominance, maybe we break down early August, let's say the 10th, and then this whole breakdown lasts maybe 30 days roughly if we're just guessing. That does take us into that early September. As you can see down the bottom, that is the 9th of September. Maybe it takes a little bit longer to play out, but it is getting scarily close to that 17th of September, which what's most scary about that is, yes, there is a rate cut in 14 hours. Yes, we are going to stay paused. But if we have a look over here on the 17th of September, you can see that the market is now pricing in a 64% chance at rates actually being cut. So we'll see how things play out in the next 14 hours for the rates. But if the Fed comes out and hints to the fact that they are likely to cut rates at the next meeting, again on the 17th of September, and we start to see the dominance break down from these levels, the market gets bullish because we're going to go into a cutting cycle and everyone thinks that's bullish for some reason, even though 8 out of the last 9 times we've cut, it's led to recessions. What we could see here is a breakdown in the Bitcoin dominance and coins like XRP actually surge to the upside. And I think what we're seeing on the lower time frames here, similar to the way things played out back when I made my last video in early July, it wouldn't surprise me to actually see all of that happen over the course of the next month or two, leading us into early September, but not before we do see XRP go and perform the same way Litecoin did in 2017 and complete a full extension. Which, for those who haven't watched the first video in the series, that is XRP doing a full extension of this range here from the low of the dump, similar to the way we actually measured things out on Litecoin here to the low of the initial dump. But I'll grab another fib tool just to have a little bit more accuracy and actually draw that out to the low that happened when the tariffs occurred. And what you'll see is that if we zoom out, scroll up here, have a look at where those 4.236 extensions land us. We're either going to get an $8.60 XRP, maybe a little higher, or a $9.18 XRP, maybe a little bit higher. So that is why we have the price targets of the $8 to $9 XRP for this series. Wouldn't surprise me if we do see $10, similar to the way Litecoin actually poked a little bit above here, closed a couple candles to the upside. Wouldn't surprise me if we see something similar like that on XRP in a very explosive, hyped up moment. Could even start to see something as high as $11.50 or $12. But this is the target we're looking for here on the channel, which from current price is a roughly almost 200% increase, which doesn't sound like a lot for crypto because a lot of people in this space are looking for 10x's and 20x's and 100x's. However, in these final late stages of the cycle, a 200% gain from current price levels on a big cap coin like XRP is something to be expected. And that even if we have a look at Litecoin, once we actually seen it break out from the highs that it set here during its mid-cycle correction, what we can see here on Litecoin is that when Litecoin actually went for this final rally and this push in its cycle, it did push about 300% higher here. So anything between that 200 to 300% from these late stages of the market cycle isn't out of the ordinary, isn't something that we haven't seen before. And I do think in a larger market cap environment where these coins are much bigger than they were back in 2017, for example, that to see 200% in comparison to 300% back in 2017 is more than acceptable in my mind. So guys, moving forward, I'll be keeping this series more frequently updated, and I do think one of the main catalysts that's actually going to cause XRP and the rest of the market to push higher in the coming days could be what we see in the next 14 hours at the FOMC meeting, especially if the Fed comes out hawkish and starts to talk about how they're likely to cut rates at the next meeting on the 17th of September. But for now, guys, I'm going to leave this here on the chart, and in the coming videos I do think we will see XRP's price surge up to these levels, and that right now everything that we're seeing here play out is completely normal, exactly the way it did on Litecoin again on 2017, which is just scarily similar. But you know, history never repeats, but it often rhymes, and what we're seeing is just another example of that playing out on today's price chart. So guys, I'll keep you updated with this series on the channel. However, the next video will be when we see XRP back at those $3.60, $3.70 areas, and hopefully breaking to the upside similar to the way Litecoin did. And as far as things go for the trade, I do want to keep that private for the time being, just for security reasons. But towards the end of this challenge, when we do see XRP's price in those $8 to $9 regions and we are closing out the trade, I will update that all with you guys on how that's been playing out. So if you want to follow along with this series, feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. If you have any questions, drop them down below in the comments section, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.